Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive. We're going to be tackling a topic that I think is pretty universally appealing.
Yeah.
Confidence. We're going to approach it maybe from a little bit of a different angle this time.
Okay.
We're going to be using some Buddhist wisdom
Right.
to see it in a whole new light.
I like it.
So have you ever felt like your confidence is kind of like on a roller coaster?
Sure.
You know, soaring with praise 1 minute
Yeah.
and then plummeting with criticism the next.
Yeah, that's a great place to start because I think a lot of people think of confidence as this unwavering, unshakable trait.
Right.
But in reality, it often feels a lot more like being tossed around in a hurricane.
It does, right?
Yeah.
It's like you're that inflatable tube man.
Yes.
You know, just wildly flailing in the wind.
Exactly.
At the mercy of every external force.
It is, yeah.
So how does Buddhism help us find that inner stability amidst all that chaos?
Well, Buddhists have this concept called the eight worldly winds, which are these pairs of forces that constantly blow through our lives. You know, pleasure and pain, praise and criticism, fame and insignificant success and failure.
Right.
And learning to navigate these winds without getting completely swept away is really key to cultivating genuine confidence.
Okay, so those winds sound pretty familiar.
Yeah.
I think we all experience those things.
For sure.
But it's that not getting swept away part that I'm really curious about.
Yeah.
So let's start with pleasure and pain.
Okay.
Those seem like such fundamental forces driving so much of our behavior.
Absolutely. And, you know, our modern world has gotten incredibly good at exploiting those drives.
Yeah.
Think about how often you reach for your phone just to avoid a few moments of boredom or discomfort.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, it's like we're living in a dopamine dystopia, you know, hooked on these tiny little hits of pleasure.
Yeah, it's true. I'm totally guilty of that mindless scrolling myself.
Yeah, me too.
But how does Buddhism offer a different way of relating to these feelings?
Well, it starts with recognizing the difference between pain, which is inevitable,
Right.
and suffering, which is really our resistance to that pain.
Okay.
So Buddhist teachings encourage us to develop upekkha, which is a kind of equanimity or resilience in the face of both the pleasant and the unpleasant experiences.
So it's not about becoming emotionless, but about learning to respond mindfully rather than reacting on autopilot.
Precisely. And in fact, there are studies that have shown that experienced meditators, they actually experience physical pain more vividly.
Wow.
But they don't suffer as much from the anticipation or the rumination about it afterwards. They've learned to observe the sensation without getting caught up in the story around it.
That's fascinating. So it's like they've developed this ability to separate the actual feeling from all the mental baggage that we usually pile on top of it.
Exactly. And there's actually a really simple tool that anyone can use to cultivate this kind of awareness. It's called noticing your feeling tone.
Feeling tone. Tell me more about that.
So think of it as like taking your emotional temperature.
Okay.
Like, is this moment feeling warm, cold, or neutral? And just pausing to notice that throughout your day can be incredibly revealing, you know?
Right.
You start to see those habitual patterns, the cravings, the aversions, the endless mental chatter.
Yeah.
And that awareness, it creates space for choice.
I like that, taking your emotional temperature. So instead of grabbing our phones for that quick hit of pleasure, we can pause and ask ourselves, what am I actually feeling right now? What's this discomfort trying to tell me?
Exactly. And sometimes the answer might just be, I'm bored and that's okay.
Yeah.
Or I'm feeling a bit lonely and that's okay too.
Right.
Allowing ourselves to feel those uncomfortable emotions without judgment is a huge step towards developing that inner resilience.
That reminds me of that story about the Zen master who, when asked what brought him the most joy in life, simply replied, drinking tea.
Oh, I love that.
It's about finding contentment in those simple things without needing all those external distractions.
That's a perfect example.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not about seeking constant pleasure or avoiding all pain, but about learning to be present with whatever arises.
Yeah.
Without letting it dictate our sense of self-worth.
Okay, so we've explored pleasure and pain. Now let's move on to those winds of praise and criticism.
Okay.
And those feel particularly relevant in today's world of social media where everyone has an opinion and they're not afraid to share it.
Absolutely. So imagine this. You're at your own art gallery opening.
Okay.
Surrounded by people admiring your work.
Yeah.
You overhear these glowing compliments and your confidence soars.
Yeah.
But then you catch a snippet of harsh criticism and suddenly you're spiraling downward.
Oh, yeah. I can definitely relate to that feeling. It's like each comment positive or negative, just hits you, and you're at the mercy of that external validation.
And that's precisely what the Buddha's teachings encourage us to question, this idea that our worth is determined by those external judgments.
Right.
Remember those worldly winds. They're impermanent. They're constantly changing. Clinging to praise or fearing criticism is like building your house on shifting sand.
So how do we find solid ground in the midst of all that swirling judgment?
Yeah.
Especially in the age of social media, where it feels like that scrutiny is amplified 1,000 times over.
Right. Well, that's where this concept of impermanence becomes so powerful. It's this understanding that everything is constantly changing.
Right.
Nothing lasts forever, not even our reputations or those fleeting moments of social media fame.
Yeah. And I remember you mentioned the movie Coco earlier with that line about how a person dies twice.
Oh, yeah.
The first time when they physically die and the second time when they're forgotten.
Right.
And it really makes you think about how much energy we invest in chasing this recognition that ultimately just fades away.
Exactly. And that brings us to a really intriguing practice, I think, for cultivating resilience in the face of these winds. It's contemplating your aloneness.
Contemplating my aloneness.
Yeah.
That sounds a bit daunting, to be honest.
It might sound intimidating, but it can actually be incredibly liberating.
Okay.
Imagine taking some time, just sit quietly, disconnect from all the external noise. Picture yourself in a world where nobody's watching, where there are no likes, no followers, no comments to validate your existence.
Right.
What truly matters to you when you strip away all that external validation?
Wow, that's a powerful image.
Yeah.
It really forces you to confront your own values, like your own internal compass,
Mm-hmm.
rather than constantly looking to others for direction. But I have to admit, it also makes me realize how much I rely on those external markers for my sense of self. It's like I'm afraid of getting lost in that vastness of aloneness.
And that fear is completely understandable. We're social creatures. We're wired for connection. But here's the paradox. By embracing that aloneness, by becoming comfortable with our own company, we actually create a stronger foundation for genuine connection with others.
So it's not about becoming a hermit and shutting out the world.
Not at all. No, it's about recognizing that our worthiness doesn't come from those external markers,
Right.
but from something much deeper within ourselves.
Yeah.
And when we can tap into that inner source, then we can engage with the world from a place of wholeness and authenticity,
Right.
rather than constantly seeking validation.
Yeah, I love that it's like shifting from a scarcity mindset where we're constantly competing for attention and approval to an abundance mindset where we recognize our inherent worthiness.
Exactly. And it also allows us to approach influence in a more mindful way.
Yeah.
If you do gain a platform,
Right.
how will you use it?
Yeah.
Will you use it to lift others up? Will you use it to create positive change? True confidence empowers you to ask those questions and act from a place of integrity.
That makes so much sense. Okay, so we've covered pleasure and pain, praise and criticism. Let's move on to those final wins, success and failure.
Okay.
And those are huge ones, especially in our achievement-oriented culture.
They are, and it's fascinating how often we view them as these opposites,
Yeah.
as if they defined who we are. But Buddhist teachings offer a completely different perspective. They encourage us to see both success and failure as fleeting experiences, constructs that we've created in our minds.
But those constructs feel so real.
Yeah.
I mean, landing your dream job feels amazing, and getting rejected from that same job can be absolutely crushing.
Right.
So how do we navigate those experiences without getting completely swept away by the emotions?
Well, it starts with recognizing that the comparative mind is at play.
The comparative mind.
Yeah, it's that voice in our heads that's constantly measuring ourselves against others, making us feel like we're either winning or losing.
Oh, that voice is so familiar.
Yeah.
I can be having a perfectly lovely day, feeling grateful for all the good things in my life. And then I see a post on social media about someone else's achievement, and suddenly my own success feels inadequate.
Right. That's the comparative mind in action, whispering those insidious doubts. You're not good enough. You're not doing enough. You're falling behind it. It thrives on that scarcity mentality, believing there's only a limited amount of success to go around.
It's exhausting.
Yeah.
It's like you're on this constant treadmill, striving, comparing, never quite feeling satisfied. So how do we step off that treadmill and find a more sustainable path?
One powerful antidote is cultivating
Mudita.
which is often translated as sympathetic joy. It's the practice of genuinely rejoicing in the happiness and success of others.
Okay, that sounds beautiful in theory, but I have to be honest, it's hard to feel genuinely happy for someone when you're struggling yourself.
Yeah.
Is that even realistic?
It is, but it takes practice
Okay.
and a willingness to look at envy with a bit more curiosity than judgment. So instead of pushing it away or beating yourself up for feeling it, try to understand what it's revealing about your own aspirations.
You mean instead of seeing envy as this negative emotion, we can actually use it as a source of information?
Exactly. Maybe that envy is a signpost pointing you towards something that you truly desire.
Mm.
It might be a nudge to pursue a hidden passion or to reevaluate your priorities.
That's such an interesting perspective. So instead of getting stuck in that cycle of comparison and self-criticism,
Yeah.
we can use those feelings as fuel for growth. But how do we actually cultivate that sympathetic joy, especially when our ego is screaming, wait, what about me?
It starts with small steps. Maybe it's simply acknowledging someone's accomplishment without adding a qualifier or downplaying their success. Maybe it's sending a genuine congratulatory message, even if you're feeling a twinge of envy.
I like that, starting with small, intentional acts of kindness. And over time, maybe those acts start to shift something within us.
Exactly. And speaking of practices that can help shift our perspective, remember those mini failures we experience every time we sit down to meditate?
Oh, you mean those moments when our mind wanders and we have to gently bring our attention back to the breath?
Precisely. Each time we do that, we're training our minds to be more resilient, to not be thrown off course by every little setback.
Right.
And that skill, it translates directly to our lives off the cushion.
So when we encounter challenges or setbacks in the real world, we can tap into that same muscle of resilience that we've been developing through meditation.
Exactly. Instead of getting caught in that self-criticism or despair, we can acknowledge the difficulty that you had to learn from it and keep moving forward.
I love how these practices from Buddhism, like mindfulness and meditation, offer such practical tools for navigating these very real challenges of everyday life.
Yeah.
It's not about escaping reality, but about engaging with it in a more skillful way.
That's a great way to put it. And it starts to paint, I think, a very different picture of what true confidence looks like.
Right.
It's not about being fearless or invulnerable. It's about having the inner strength to weather those worldly winds without losing sight of who we are.
This is starting to feel like a roadmap for building that kind of unshakable confidence.
Yeah.
A confidence that's not dependent on external circumstances or other people's approval.
And that roadmap leads us to the foundation of true confidence, which is built on these three interconnected pillars: self-awareness, self-compassion, and agency.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Let's dive into those pillars. So what does self-awareness entail in this context?
So self-awareness is about developing a clear and honest understanding of your own inner landscape, without judgment or denial.
Okay.
It's about recognizing your strengths and weaknesses, your tendencies and patterns.
So it's about getting to know ourselves, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But wouldn't that make us overly self-critical? I mean, most of us are pretty good at focusing on our flaws already.
That's where self-compassion comes in.
Okay.
It's about treating ourselves with the same kindness and understanding that we would offer to a dear friend.
Yeah, right.
It's about recognizing that we're all imperfect, we all make mistakes, and that's okay.
That's a crucial point. It's like we need to befriend ourselves to offer ourselves that same warmth and support we so readily give to others.
Exactly. And when we combine that self-awareness with self-compassion, something really powerful happens.
What's that?
We start to see our flaws not as reasons to hide or to punish ourselves, but as opportunities for growth.
So we have self-awareness, which helps us see ourselves clearly, and self-compassion, which helps us treat ourselves kindly. What about that third pillar, agency?
So agency is about recognizing our inherent power to make choices and to take action, even in the face of fear or uncertainty.
Okay.
It's about showing up for ourselves and for the things that matter to us.
I love that it's about moving from a passive stance to an active one, taking ownership of our lives.
Exactly. And here's the key. All three of these pillars, self-awareness, self-compassion, and agency, they're interconnected and mutually reinforcing. So when we develop self-awareness, it becomes easier to practice self-compassion.
Right.
And when we treat ourselves with compassion, we're more likely to take courageous action.
So it's like a virtuous cycle. Each element supports and strengthens the others,
Yeah.
creating the solid foundation for genuine and lasting confidence.
Right. That's a great way to put it. And the beauty of this kind of confidence
Yeah.
is that it's not dependent on those external circumstances.
Right.
It's not about achieving some arbitrary level of success or gaining the approval of others.
It's about cultivating that deep sense of inner stability and worthiness that allows us to engage with the world from a place of wholeness and authenticity, no matter what those 8 worldly winds throw our way.
Exactly. And that, my friend, is true freedom.
Wow. It feels like we've gone on such an incredible journey today,
Yeah.
exploring this whole new approach to confidence.
It is amazing how much wisdom we can find in these Buddhist teachings, how relevant they still are
Yeah,
to our lives today.
absolutely. So for listeners who are feeling inspired and want to start cultivating this kind of unshakable confidence,
Hmm.
what are some key takeaways they can put into practice?
Well, I think the first thing to remember is that this is a journey, not a destination.
Right.
There's no magic formula or quick fix.
Yeah.
It's about consistently showing up for ourselves
Mhm.
with curiosity and compassion day after day.
It's about progress, not perfection.
Exactly. And remember that simple practice we talked about, noticing your feeling tone.
Right.
Just taking a pause throughout the day to observe, whether each moment feels warm, cold, or neutral
Mhm.
can make a huge difference.
It's like we're becoming the scientist of our own inner world.
I like that analogy. And when those big emotions inevitably arise,
Yeah.
the joy, the sadness, the anger, the fear, we can meet them with self-compassion.
Right.
Instead of judging ourselves for feeling those things,
Yeah.
we can offer ourselves that same kindness and understanding we'd offer to a friend.
Yeah. I think that's so important. We tend to be so hard on ourselves, especially when we're struggling.
Yeah, and that's precisely when we need self-compassion the most.
Right.
It's not about letting ourselves off the hook or ignoring our problems, but about creating a safe and supportive inner space to work through those challenges.
And that brings us to that third pillar, agency. It's about recognizing our power to choose,
Yeah,
to act, to create change in our lives.
exactly. It's about moving from, I wish things were different, to what can I do to make things different?
Yeah, and so often we wait until we feel confident before taking action,
Right.
but it sounds like you're saying it's the other way around.
Yeah,
Action creates confidence.
absolutely. Every time we step outside our comfort zone,
Yeah.
every time we face a challenge and come out the other side, we're strengthening that muscle of resilience and self-trust.
This has been such an insightful deep dive. I feel like I've gained a whole new understanding of what confidence truly means. It's not about arrogance or perfection, but about cultivating that inner strength and resilience.
And it's a journey we can all embark on, no matter where we're starting from.